Hi there, welcome to my channel Math SL. I'm speaking Thaqib Latif. I want to show you now about the equation of the graph. Y is equal to sine theta plus q. I just want to minimize the video, so I write the concepts, then I'm going to explain to you now one by one. So the A stands for amplitude shift and the Q stands for vertical shift, and which mean if the Q is greater than 0, which mean a positive, this is a mathematical language, then vertical shift upwards by q units. So if the q is less than 0, which mean negative, then downwards by q units. Graph vertical shift by downwards by q units. Now this side, if the a is greater than 1, we cannot say greater than 0, because if something I put 0 here, 0 multiply sine gonna be 0, so that's why it must be greater than 1. So this is if the sine theta is 1, so whatever is amplitude, if the amplitude is greater than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the graph stretch vertically. And if a is less, which mean if you find the -3, -2, the graph reflected across the x-axis flipped vertically, which means still stretch vertically but flipped vertically across the x-axis. Graph will have a reflection across the x-axis. Now I'll show you with example how to solve this one. Say we have this example. The graph of y is equal to sine theta and y is equal to 2 sine theta. I need to uh, sketch these graphs. So the theta is stand for the angles. So we count angles in 90s. 0, 90, 180 degree, 270 and 360. You can punch the calculator also, you will find these answers. 0 degree 0, because the graph always at 0 we got 3 x-intercept at 0 degree, 180 degree and 360 degree, and the maximum is 90 degree and the minimum is -1 by the 270 degree. Now this graph, if you say 2 sine theta, you just, this is the coefficient of sine theta is 2, you just multiply by 2. So the 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times -1 is -2. So this is my table. Now I will show you also how to sketch the graph without table. So I'm going to sketch the graph now. I'll show you how. Must remember, you don't need to make the table with 30, 45, so on. Just use the, you must count in 90s. So I'm going to show you the first graph about the vertical stretch. I draw the y-axis and x-axis, and this is 0, 90 degree, 180 degree. These are my coordinates of x-axis, and so then I display the angles on x-axis. Must remember, you don't need to change here. 90, 180, 270, 360, we keep it this way, right? So even they say to give you 45, 30, but you still stick to 90, 180, 270 and 360 degree. Now I can say my sine theta, which is a basic graph. Basic graph is minimum value is -1. I decide my -1 is here, and the maximum is +1. I decide my +1 is here. So which mean by the 90 degree must touch the +1, and by the 270 degree must touch the uh, -1, and all others are x-intercepts. So we start from 0, peak, maximum, and then we come down by the 180 degree. Now we have to touch the uh, minimum, which is going to be at 270, is going to be somewhere here. So which mean, and I go back there by the 360. So this is my maximum and this is my minimum. This is for sine theta. Have a look here. For 2 sine theta, my maximum is 2 and my minimum is -2. And maximum is 2. I decide my maximum 2 is there and my minimum to -2 is here. Now, so which means the graph is gonna vertically now. So my 90 degree, so by there my turning point is gonna be there, and the 270 degree is gonna be somewhere here, because 270 negative 2, 90 positive 2. But remember, sine theta 90 degree 1, and 270 degree at 270 degree negative 1. 2 sine theta at 90 degree positive 2, at 270 degree negative 2. Now, so now we're going to sketch the graph. Obviously, again this graph have to cut the x-axis also. So we're going to the graph maximum. After the maximum, have to come down the graph by the 180 degree, and from the 180 degree again, this is my minimum turning point, and then I'm gonna go back to 360 degree. Now this is the first, the top graph is y is equal to 2 sine theta. The bottom graph is y is equal to sine theta. So you can see the graph stretch vertically. Have a look here. From here is go above, and you can see we're using the y-axis. And if you come by the minimum, this is the maximum. If you look at the minimum, so minimum turning point here for the sine theta, but 2 sine theta minimum turning point is again uh, at the bottom. So again we using the y-axis. So when we use the y-axis, which mean is the graph is only stretch vertically. Yeah, because we never use the x-axis. Horizontal shifting only we're gonna do in grade 11. When the graph uh, stretch horizontally, then it's gonna be on a positive x-axis and negative x-axis. So we're not gonna use now that. So now the graph is only stretch vertically. So the graph only stretch vertically. We only using the y-axis. So the graph stretch vertically. Now I want to show you the second part where is going to be a negative. Say we have a negative 2 sine. So if we have a negative 2 sine theta, so what will happen? Same graph, we just put the negative 2 here now. I can make another table, say negative 2 sine theta, and what will happen? Then this is still going to be 0. This become negative 2, 0. This become negative, negative become positive. This still going to be 0. So now negative 2 sine theta, my maximum is at 270 degree and my minimum is at 90 degree. Have a look how to sketch this one. This is I earlier explained to you. This is the graph reflected across the x-axis flipped vertically. I'll show you how. Because when you see the negative 2 sine theta and negative 2 sine theta, it's the same graph but the flipped. Have a look. So we got 3 graph now. We first do the sine theta, the basic one, then 2 sine theta. Now we're gonna do the negative 2 sine theta. Now our amplitude value is negative 2, but the amplitude never gonna be a negative, always positive. I'll show you how. So the negative graph gonna start at, still gonna start by the 0, but the 90 degree is gonna be a negative 2. At 270 degree gonna be a, somewhere there is a positive. Your graph don't need to be according to scale, but you must know, they want to see if you know the concepts. So I'm gonna sketch the graph now. From there again by the 180 degree, and then again maximum by the 270 degree, and come back to 360 degree. So now at this point my 90 degree is here and turning point, and this is a positive one, and then by the 270 degree and come back to again 360 degree. So now this is a graph the flipped vertically. How? You don't need, you're not going to write in exam like this. Have a look here. If I look from the top, and I look down, I will look here, then this is from there, y is equal to 2 sine theta. So this graph is y is equal to negative 2 sine theta is a reflection of that graph. And if I look from the bottom to the top, and you can see negative 2 sine theta and the y is equal to 2 sine theta, this is the reflection of this graph. So that's why we say the reflected on x-axis. So this graph vertical stretch, this one, y is equal to negative 2 sine theta, vertical stretch, but reflection on x-axis. So let me clear with you, the vertical stretch mean top and bottom, you only using the y value. If I say horizontal stretch, then gonna be right and left, but we didn't use the left hand side x-axis values. So that you only gonna do in grade 11. Now if I say a reflection on x-axis, which means top and bottom. If I say reflection on y-axis, right and left. But now we're not going to use reflection on y-axis. We're using reflection on x-axis because y is equal to negative 2 sine theta is a reflection on y-axis. Because y is equal to negative 2 sine theta, reflection on x-axis. So if I need to find the maximum value of negative 2 sine theta, so the maximum value gonna be positive 2 because is a maximum, the graph is reach, is peak is positive 2. So the maximum is 2 and the minimum is negative 2. Now, how to find the range of this graph y is equal to negative 2 sine theta? So the range is gonna be a between negative 2 and negative 2 and positive 2. You write the big bracket both included. Now if I need to find the range of y is equal to 2 sine theta, is going to be same. If I need to find the y is equal to 2 sine theta, maximum and minimum value is same, negative 2 and positive 2. Right. Now the altitude, say I want to find the altitude of negative 2 sine theta. So the formula say 1 over 2 maximum minus the minimum. So the 1 over 2 maximum we got now, maximum positive 2, minimum negative 2. Now negative become positive is 4. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 over 2. The answer gonna be 2. Still positive 2. Can you see? The answer is still positive 2. Even the altitude sign is negative 2, but the altitude turn to positive. So which mean even negative or positive, the altitude stay the same positive. Must remember negative sign indicate a reflection in the horizontal x-axis. Altitude always is positive, so therefore you can ignore the sign. Why? Look here. So the negative 2 altitude sign is negative 2, but when we work out with the formula, the answer is come positive 2. You can apply the formula every time if they ask you to find the altitude, or you just ignore the sign, ignore the negative sign, and then you write the answer, because either way altitude only gonna be a positive. You can see we proved with the formula. So must remember altitude always gonna be a positive, even negative sign here. So you ignore the negative sign. You ignore the negative sign. We proved with a formula. Now, but the coefficient of sine theta is negative 2. So we cannot say this is a positive 2. The coefficient value is negative 2. Please like and subscribe my channel. If you have any question, comment below. I will assist you. In my next video, I will show you about the vertical shift of sine theta graph.